I'm set and ready to go when you are, Ken.
Okay, that's great. All right, welcome everybody. Thanks very much for meeting outside our regular schedule to accommodate virtual meeting. There's a couple things I need to go over first. I'd like to review a few procedural items before we start our first virtual meeting to assist the meeting in operating as efficiently as possible. So first of all members will be muted when not speaking during the meeting to reduce feedback. If you are joining the meeting using a device with a webcam, please enable your video function. If your name still appears as Brantford Panelist, please right-click on the text Brantford Panelist and rename yourself using your first and last name. I think we're all together on that now. If you wish to speak during the discussion period, please physically raise your hand and you will be invited to speak by the chair. In the event a connection service interruption occurs, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain connection. After 15 minutes, if it's still interrupted, then the meeting will be adjourned. Finally, thank you for your patience as we navigate this new pathway. So item number 1, roll call. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Mayor Kevin Davis.
I'm here.
Councillor John Utley. Ken Caracas.
Here.
Greg Kempa.
I think I know her somehow. The name, once you said it.
Morning.
I think she did an investigation.
Alan Lovett.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, I know her from somehow.
Thanks for joining us, Al. Kirby Brown.
Here, thank you.
Ed Doucette. No Ed yet. Okay. Stacey Fleming sends his regrets. Paul McCagg.
Here.
Thank you, Paul. Mark Simpson.
Here.
Greg Nevin. Paul Basanti and Carrie Korfman. Thank you.
Great. Item 2, declaration of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have any pecuniary interest to declare on this agenda? None? Okay. Delegations. Today, there are no delegations for today's meeting. Items for consideration. So I'd like to thank KPMG for considering EDAC's input on the City of Brantford's development review process. Before we begin the presentation, I should mention that the City of Brantford's presentation policy allows for 10 minutes only, inclusive of questions. Do any members of EDAC wish to move a motion that the designated speaking time of 10 minutes, inclusive of questions, be suspended to allow the consulting firm KPMG to address the Economic Development Advisory Committee without time constraint?
Mr. Chair. You know, I will move that and seeking a seconder. And the reason for that is because primarily for council meetings, they don't go to 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't think we have quite the same issue here. It's an important report. I don't think it should be limited to 10 minutes.
And second,
I guess I'd ask how long do they think they're going to take?
That's true. Greg, you're going to second that motion?
Happy to.
All right, that's great. All in favor? Carried. All right, thank you. I will invite KPMG to begin their presentation now. We have Sana and Bruce are here from KPMG.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sana Malik. Bruce, I don't believe is going to be joining, but we have Jermel Francis on the line, who is a key member of the team that is has done this review with us. So before we start, I believe the questionnaires for today's meeting was shared, but I just want to briefly touch upon what this project is about and why KPMG was retained. So the City of Brantford, give me one second here. The City of Brantford retained KPMG in February 2020. And the purpose of the assessment is to identify opportunities to streamline and improve the overall responsiveness and customer experience for service users in the development community. As part of this project, what we're going to be doing is end-to-end process mapping, taking applications when the developer comes, submits an application all the way till the end, and analyzing what are the pain points, what are the key areas of improvement, and what can be improved. Stakeholder consultation is a critical part of the assessment process. KPMG has interviewed staff, the development community, external commenting partners, and the development industry as well. All interviews that we had were on a confidential basis, and input from each was put into teams, and we've already started the phase where we're presenting our findings to management and the task force. This meeting was scheduled, I believe, was meant to be scheduled earlier, but due to the pandemic, the process was a bit delayed. However, I just want to make sure that we let you know that if there is anything that is different from what we have not heard or presented, it will certainly be incorporated in the next phases of our project. Having said that, we have the questionnaire. Like I said, I think it was passed on to you. Just wanted to understand how this group is joined with the development review process. What roles do you play and who do you interact with? I'll open the floor, and if everybody can chime in, or if anybody has feedback on that in terms of what roles do you play and who do you interact with the city of Brantford.
Anyone have a comment to get started?
So perhaps it might not be one person, perhaps it could be a group. If anybody, I'm going to go through the questions, we can certainly come back again. Let's just skip to the next part of the questions and then we can come back. I guess what we want to know is, you know about the city's development review process. What we want to know is, what do you think, in your opinion, based on feedback you've heard or your own experience, what is going well with the current process? Does anybody have any feedback on the current process?
Paul?
Okay, thank you, Sana. I'll answer your first question now that I sort of know where you're going. So on this committee, I represent the Chamber of Commerce. I'm the Chamber of Commerce liaison. So the Chamber of Commerce interacts with various staff and politically elected officials on commenting on various documents and various policies, identifying from our membership's experience with the development community what works, what doesn't work. We also have a number of members that have experience in other municipalities, and so we also bring a voice to the table that allows us to sort of cross-pollinate some best practices that we've seen in other communities. If I take off my Chamber of Commerce hat, I also work for Lanka Contracting Limited. We are an industrial, commercial, and residential developer. And so we have a number of active files with the city, with the county, with neighboring municipalities. And so the context for our commenting allows us to do that directly from our experience, as well as borrow from the experience of members of the Chamber of Commerce.
Thanks, Paul. Do you have a comment on what, in your experience, in both your roles, has been going well with the development review process?
Well, for one, we certainly applaud that there is a review process underway and that it is evaluating current practices and trying to identify gaps. We've recognized across lots of different disciplines and jurisdictions that the world order of how work gets conducted needs to change in these post-COVID times. Things need to be leaner, things need to be more electronic, and the the communication that happens in an electronic format between municipal staff and proponents of a development needs to be concise and well tracked and well documented. The development process involves many different disciplines on any given file, and the ability to convey information that municipalities want to see corrected on an application in an easily digestible form helps the proponent convey those requirements to either their stakeholder group or their owners or their clients in a more layman digestible fashion. So I will say that we haven't made a development application to the city since the start of the COVID pandemic. So I'm not familiar with what processes have changed since March, but I will be drawing on experience from late 2019 as our most recent application.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. And processes have changed based on our current knowledge. A lot of applications can still be submitted through email now, which was different from before. Does anybody want to chime in on when we're talking about some of the positives that they have faced with the City of Brantford's development review process in their capacity or in their current roles? Okay, so maybe we'll open the floor to, in terms of what you've heard, where does it fall short? So City of Brantford has a very dynamic development review process. I just would like to open the floor and find out, where do you think are some of the areas of improvement based on your interactions with the city or what you've heard from the development community based on feedback? Does anybody want to share?
Paul?
In my experience, I think it's easy for different disciplines of municipal staff to get siloed. Building department thinks about building department issues, planning department thinks about planning issues, engineering thinks about engineering issues. And at times, the message that comes out about status of a file, where it's at, and what actually needs to happen for it to get approval, or maybe conditional approval, or sometimes sort of fast track review process. The different departments will oftentimes not relay the same message or the same tone about how soon and how quickly approval can be granted. And it often takes sort of an individual that has either authority or a role over all those disciplines simultaneously to be able to convey an accurate message. We've had experience on a file, and by no means was anything maliciously done, but just because everyone was working in silos, the message got muddled and confusing. And so our guidance to our stakeholders did not come across in a clear and accurate fashion, because there was this sort of convergence of different opinions of how much or how little needed to be accomplished before final approval was granted. I've seen in other jurisdictions that the person that takes that role, that oversees all those other things, is actually part of the ACDEV initiative of the municipality. And that ACDEV being the point of contact certainly helps. And in the case I'm referencing, ACDEV did get involved, but they didn't necessarily have a formal point of contact on the application file.
That's good. That's good feedback, Paul.
It's also for any project stakeholders. many times that project stakeholder's first introduction to the municipality, unless they have a relationship with a councillor or a staff member, is through ECDEV. They are possibly moving into the city. They are looking for business improvement grants, or they're looking for what have you. And often the first phone call is to ECDEV. And so there's added value in continuity of a relationship with the city and a project stakeholder that can happen through the site plan and building permit process. If ECDEV becomes maybe more involved or has a wider mandate with actual application files. And ECDEV also speaks the language of new tax revenue for the city. So that's something that allows a project stakeholder who's investing heavily in doing business in Brantford to be able to speak meaningfully to the revenue side of what the city is looking for in these applications as well.
Right. That's good.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Alan Levitt has sent me a
Yes.
message that he'd like to contribute to the conversation. He's joining us by
Alan?
telephone, so we aren't able to see Al's hand raised.
Okay, Alan, go ahead. Alan, are you there? Alan? No? I must have lost the connection, I guess. Anybody else want to speak until Alan gets back on the line?
I just wanted to say something briefly if I could.
Yes. Go ahead,
Okay.
Gary.
Okay. I just wanted to expand on what Paul just said. I think more of a one-stop, one-window approach would work better. I know a lot of our members have had problems. They go to the one department planning, they're told what they have to do to get their permits, and then they find out from another department there's something else on top of that they have to do. It's just one thing after another. I think if there was more of a one window approach where the planning and building and engineering all work together, maybe one person contact, like he was saying in ECDEV, I think that would help matters and make everyone more streamlined.
Paul? Paul McCaig?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I watched the building construction task force meeting a week ago. I saw the 39 recommendations or points of concern or issues. I thought, Santa, that you're off to a great start and that KPMG has done a good job of identifying the issues at hand. I think part of this committee here and how that relates to the building process and economic development, I think that's something that we need to understand how this committee functions with planning, because Santa, you asked how we interact as a committee. As near as I can tell, we review bylaw changes. I think that's what we've been doing the last few meetings, and having the planning department come in and present some issues of the day to us, which I think is helpful for the committee. But how that relates and how we can support the development review process, I think is up to some debate and discussion.
Corey, were we able to get Alan back on?
I haven't been able to establish a connection with Alan.
Okay, all right. Anyone else like to comment? Mark?
Thank you. I think my comment would be, so I'm a citizen appointee to the committee, And I think my comment would be is that the Economic Development Advisory Committee actually has two mandates. It's got the economic development portion of it, plus it's got the Planning Advisory Committee part of it. And the same members of the committee are on both. And while our meetings are minuted separately, there is sometimes a sort of a feeling of overlap that we've got one that we're doing not that we're doing the same thing, but that stuff that's happening in the planning advisory portion bleeds into the economic development advisory portion. The economic development advisory side of it, though, is I see our committee as sort of being able to kind of step back and hopefully work more at a 30,000 foot level over top of what's going on, both with the development industry, be it residential or commercial or industrial, the city, planning staff, building staff, engineering staff, looking to make certain that we've got the sufficient infrastructure, and then providing some, maybe some pointed questions, mostly back to the city and the various staff members on sort of what is it that's holding up the city's ability to attract more development or to develop our lands even further so that we can maximize the economic potential, both for the residents and for the city.
Thanks, Mark. Greg, did you have a comment?
I did. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I was listening to some of those comments, I was taken back to my role within the utility. And when we had large customers coming to us with specific projects, internally, we had one point of contact for that customer to go to. And that point of contact, me at the time, was responsible for coordinating the efforts of our capacity planning, our building, our construction groups, so that that customer wasn't having to make 3 or 4 different calls. One person was in charge of knowing where that file was in its development and what the next steps were. It was also part of that mandate to shepherd it through in as quick a process as is possible. It just struck me that if Paul's example of having to touch base with so many people could be streamlined so that his group was calling one person who had the answer on where that file stood, it might make things a little more customer friendly, if you will, if you think of the developer as a customer to the city. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I
Corey.
have been able to establish a connection with Alan.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Alan.
Everybody. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. I'm just running between a few places, so I'm just on the phone. Thanks for the opportunity. I'll be as brief as I can, and I've been listening in, and I'll if okay, I'll kind of hit on the previous couple of questions as well. Just as by way of background, I believe at this point, I'm just a citizen appointee of the committee. I'm a partner at Watchers Hold Mamie Hitchon, which is a law firm in town, and have a lot of clients that are in one aspect or another in the development game in town. So I've got a lot of feedback from them leading into this. I've also provided a little bit of feedback through one of my partners who's also participated in the process. So I'll keep my comments relatively brief. I guess the first thing I'd like to comment on is what works well within our city, and my opinion and a lot of my clients' opinion as well. I think is echoed that twofold. We've got a council and largely the executive within the city organization who is very approachable, very we'll say, pro-development, really wants to see projects happen, responsible projects, working with builders, and I get very little negative feedback about interactions with council members and Mr. Mayor himself about helping to push through projects, getting in front of the right people, getting the assistance. So I mean that commonly is feedback I get, that they're very pleased at that level. Secondly, the Kevin and the team with economic development, again, I get from both building clients and builder clients of mine, I get a lot of positive feedback about him and his team and their ability to disseminate information, again, put people in front of the right people, and then with the business development side of things to promote Brantford being open for business. So I think between those two teams, we've got a really good start of promoting Brantford being open for business and helping facilitate both those who want to build and those who are the builders. Where I hear a lot of frustration of what the city's, in the client's mind, falling a little bit short on, and I hate to pick on city staff because they do work really hard and have their hands full, but a lot of it revolves around the subdivision plans and site development agreements and things of that nature, where the comment I consistently get is, all I get is roadblocks and not answers. And for example, I think one of the frustrations is that we have had a fairly large turnover over the last 10-15 years within a lot of our city departments, and dealing with one person isn't always the same as dealing with the other. Echo some of Paul's comments about how there's some frustration about having to deal with in silo form. So, speaking to a planner who tells you that everything looks okay, and then sometime down the line hearing that engineering's got a massive problem with it, and there seems to be a lot of confusion in the messaging, frustration, and feeling like the process is moving, one step forward, two step back, working through that. I've had a number of clients who have dealt in outside municipalities who have raised the idea of, a higher level, liaison or contact point, or somebody who almost acts as a go-between between all the, different silos, so to speak. Because, I understand the development process touches on a lot of different departments within the city. Again, I think streamlining that process and maybe bringing things together as opposed to moving from Group A to Group B to Group C to Group D would cut a lot of that frustration. The other point, and I think it's we're underway in our development of the amended official plan for Brantford. Ever since the boundary negotiation was put in, there's been a lot of frustration of people who want to see the new official plan in place, and I think staff and council are doing all they can to push it through, and I think we're somewhat on target to have that done a little later. But that's one of the constant feedback points that I've consistently got from all sides of things, that there has to be an emphasis on this official plan to get it right and to get moving to get some new holes in the ground. So I think that kind of sums up high level from both what I think is working well and what could be improved. And again, I have passed a number of comments through one of my partners on another side of things. So happy to answer any questions, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Paul Basanti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to emphasize a nuance of one of the points I made when I spoke of it, and as Alan just mentioned, I think it needs to go beyond just creating a liaison who has, communications with the different silos. I've seen in Hamilton, they've instituted a policy where ACDEV on certain test pilot projects has that communication role. But unless there is a mandate of reporting accountability to that person, then the actual influence that person can have on resolving issues is rather limited. So in my opinion, if if this is an initiative that's going to be considered, that person, that point contact in an ECDEV or maybe another function capacity needs to have some level of reporting accountability to keep the different disciplines on track for the sake of the application as a whole.
Thank you, Paul. Any other comments? John, Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I must apologize. I missed I couldn't hear the first 13 minutes or so of the meeting. I couldn't get any sound at all. So if I'm repeating something here, I apologize in advance. But one of the recommendations on the KPMG report was to consider having an online version plus the 1 point, I think, of contact. And if we had a combination of those two, I'd just like to get some feedback from some of you directly involved in the process. What's your thinking about that approach? So you'd have the online version so you can see in real time where your project is at, who's responsible to do what. Plus you'd have 1 point of contact at City Hall to process any questions, concerns, ideas that you have.
Any
Good
comment?
idea, bad idea?
Mark Simpson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that is the online being able to see where your application is going to be of assistance to the development community, particularly in understanding what needs to happen next, or what are the multiple things that are happening at the same time that I need to be on top of or be preparing submissions for. I would caution the city staff, though, is that because of the multidisciplinary side of things in terms of planning, building, engineering, maybe environmental and as well, sometimes making certain that the online chart or path is truly up to date could become an onerous task. And I liken that back to my working life as well, where in our organization, we tried to do the same thing. It wasn't online, but we tried to keep it running for ourselves. And just doing project updates could be, depending on how many projects you've got going, will become pretty tough to keep up with. So just a comment for the city in terms of being able to ensure that the live online stuff really is as real time as possible. Thank you.
Paul Sandy?
Yes, Mr. Chair, has KPMG investigated nearby municipalities? I know Kitchener has rolled out an online building permit portal. It's not the same thing as a site plan approval portal, but from a point of view of submission of documents and seeing general status like milestone gates, I would support that. But I think some of the issues we're talking about need to be broader than what I've experienced in neighboring communities. If we're talking about an online portal that sort of tracks all comments, itemized by discipline, where the ball is in terms of whose court it's in, that's the sort of thing that I think would really help communicate to project stakeholders the overall status of an application, and might more easily avoid issues where project stakeholders are frustrated with municipal staff because they don't really have the full picture of what's being evaluated. And the latest email they have from one discipline makes them misunderstand the overall status of the project. So I think there's potentially a really good way to alleviate some of those frustrations because the communication is clear to the stakeholders.
Sana?
So Paul, just to address your question and what Councillor Ashley had mentioned, we did do a benchmarking analysis of 5 comparator municipalities that were selected by the task force. And what we found was that, yes, some of the municipalities are currently using a e-plan system. That's what they call it, electronic submission system. And it does exactly what you were mentioning, where developers would be able to input their application online. It would show which parties have actually reviewed it, checked, marked it off, and if it goes for recirculation, if the building or the engineering department does not want to see it again, it's going to be grayed out. So that means you don't have to send the documents again back to them. It's very dynamic. It is expensive. So that's obviously a bigger factor, but it's the city of Mississauga also has implemented that, city of Toronto has that. So the size definitely matters. It is going to be, we're considering adding it as a recommendation, but it certainly would be with one of the municipalities that are doing it are very appreciative of the results.
Councillor Utley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sana, through you to Sana, what's the best practice you've seen in any of the clients that you've worked with? Best, and I mean best as in terms of what's best for the client.
Certainly, through the chart, the cost is the biggest factor right now. But in terms of the best practices, leaving the cost and everything aside, going online is the future. Digital is the way to go. It's going to certainly help facilitate a lot of the process. A lot of the 39 recommendations that we had were stemming from a lot of admin work that the staff is doing. So if you go online through that e-submission process, it's going to take all that away and focus, let the development community focus and the staff focus on just getting the job done, the application through. It's yielded positive results from everybody that has done it. They've put forward some strong cases and the councils have approved it, and they haven't looked back.
Thank you, Sana. Sana, do they have it broken down into different categories? That's like small business, medium and large industrial businesses or business applications?
In the system, I haven't seen the system myself, absolutely, so I wouldn't know. But from what I understand, and in terms of reading through the systems and the feedback that we received from the other municipalities, it's like one system for everything. However, once you select what kind of application it is, it just points you towards the right direction. So it just takes off all the questions that you have to be addressed through the system.
And would you know if they have a concierge type of process with staff?
Yes, I believe that it's looked at by planning first, and then the triage happens at that point.
Right. I think the practicality of it is there could be 3 or 4 or 5 different points of contact, each one with a responsible for a certain sector. I'm just trying to think that through as how it would work in practice.
Right. And I think those are the questions that once we do decide, or if that's the way forward, then the city can decide how it wants to take that. I think the plan system itself allows you to cater to different stakeholders or just through planning. The ones that we have met with has varied from multidisciplinary teams to a concierge. It just depends on what works for the city.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mark Simpson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on where Councillor Utley was going, I think that in looking at this sort of online system, the city and the consultant should probably also recognize that there are other groups outside City Hall's direct control, other utilities, as an example, who might need to be involved in the process in one way, shape, or form, and perhaps have input into the system or into the process in such a way that they can actually hold up some kind of development as a result of insufficient infrastructure being available at a location that is and that can't be delivered in a timely fashion. So if that's a recommendation, I think that making certain that these other allied organizations to the development process are consulted on that.
Thanks, Mark. Any other comments? Mayor Davis?
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So I've tried not really to say anything because this is not the forum for me to give my input. But I did want to say a couple of things to the group that I know this group's very, very much invested in this review because we all know how critical it is to maintaining and expanding development in our community, and especially with the growth that we know is coming our way over the next 2 decades. And I can say this about the consultant, Paul, if you were sitting that meeting last week, this won't be news to you, but I'm very impressed with the work so far done by our consultant KPMG. It's been very thorough, very complete, and constructively critical what I've seen so far. And I think the end result is really going to be meaningful change to our building review task force. But picking up on the theme that has just been going back and forth, a major component to this is IT. And that's pretty clear from what I'm seeing so far. And we're going through changes there. We have a new director of our IT department. And so he'll be, I'm sure, taking the department in a different direction as he has to. There's a couple other things that are happening, the move into the new city hall and trying to look at the workplace of the future and what it's going to look like given the experience over the last 6 months. So, there's a lot on, IT's plate, and a large part of this will be, of course, incorporating the recommendations that come out of this report. It may, we may need some assistance in terms of expanding and moving out that IT system. But bottom line is this: some really great input is coming through this process. And I'm trying to turn it into a really positive process, and that a positive process in the sense that it generates really positive improvements. As Councillor Utley always says, we're looking for positive improvement. And I think this report, I believe, will be a catalyst for that. I'm optimistic of that. And your input is all very critical. That's it.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Sana, do you?
I just want to, again, just echoing what Mayor Davis said, everybody's feedback here has been very important. The points raised are really supporting to the work that we are doing. And we're going to be including that feedback in our next meeting with the task force. Just one last question that I just want to open the floor to would be like, what do you think would be the most impactful change the city could make to the development review process? We talked about IT, we talked about e-plan system. Is there anything else that just off the bat you think that's going to make an impactful change?
Paul Basanti?
I honestly think we've talked about some of the most impactful stuff, but I just wanted to add a little piece of information. In our sector, in the leads that we are getting in the construction and real estate development sector, they are coming from Hamilton. They are coming from Toronto West, and so the more we as a municipality think of ourselves as competing with them, as opposed to maybe some of our direct neighbors. I think our service offerings need to appeal to those businesses that are used to conducting site plan approvals in those other jurisdictions. Now we have a certain leg up on the development charges and taxes point of view, but they will be accustomed to the level of interaction with the municipal planning process that they have in those jurisdictions. So these online portals and the authoritative mandate to a single point of contact, I think are really going to hammer home just how valuable it is for businesses to come to Brantford from these other jurisdictions that have just become prohibitively too expensive for them to conduct their business in. There's a lot of value in Brantford. There's a great workforce here. There's great access to provincial infrastructure. And if we can just lubricate the process of getting them in and up and running in Brantford, we're going to win a lot of large employers and a lot of large businesses in this community.
Thanks, Paul. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, if I could interject, Alan Levitt would like to go ahead and speak again.
Great. Go ahead, Alan.
Hopefully I'm unmuted here. Really, again, I agree with Paul. I think we have hit a lot of the kind of the conceptual items. I just really want to say, I think, you know, the key components of a solution here, I think, have kind of three main heads to focus on. I think one is promoting efficiency, getting things from start to finish as quick as possible in a responsible manner. Two, I think it has to increase communication, whether that be point of contact, technology-based, portal-based, et cetera. I think that the communication is key in keeping people engaged and moving the process forward. And then third, I think the process needs to have some consistency. And again, I mentioned, I think that that's a frustration of a lot of my clients in the past, is that, you know, the right hand's not talking to the left, and one staff member may have a difference of opinion of how to interpret the OPP than others will. So again, really, I think just really quickly, the solution needs to focus on the efficiency, increased communication, and consistency. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Any other comments? Sana, do you feel we've covered everything that you were hoping to cover today?
Yes, Chair, certainly. I think the feedback we received truly give an idea of what this group thinks, which is critical to the development review process. Really grateful that we got the opportunity to finally meet and conduct this meeting virtually. Some of the feedback that we have received, it's certainly building on what we had previously, and it just gives us confidence that the community really wants this to happen, and this is the future that they want to see. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. We'll take all this and incorporate it in our next report to the task force.
Well, thanks very much, Sana. Really appreciate this. And do I have a mover and a seconder for this presentation to be received? Mark Simpson and Paul McCaig. Thank you very much. All in favor? Carried. All right. So we'll move on to the consent items. 5.1. I hope everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from February. May I have a mover that the following minutes be approved? Anyone? There, Councillor Otley. Second by Greg. Thank you. Carrie, all in favor? Carrie. 5.2, I'd like to invite Mayor Davis to provide Mayor and City Council update, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've got an hour. That's because, you know, there's so much I could report on. I could almost give like a State of the Union address, and it truly would take an hour. But I thought I'd highlight some of what I suspect would be of most interest to this group, and it's the focus of this group. So clearly, any conversation about an update coming from the city at this time starts with COVID-19, and a little bit about the impact of that, both positive and negative. I don't think I have to talk about the negative. We know what that is, and it's almost life-changing. It is life-changing for all of us and all the organizations that operate within this city. And I can tell you my overall goal as mayor, and I believe council as well, in dealing with this is trying to keep our community as safe as possible. I often say I consider my primary responsibility, you know, protecting public health and safety, but at the same time recognizing that, you know, we cannot go through another lockdown. That will be devastating to us economically. And so, you know, we've got to learn to live in this, it's not post-COVID, but it's what I call, you know, normal or near normal COVID. And so that, you know, the face coverings is an example of that. Much of the reason why I think many of the members of council voted for it was because it's going to be an important component of expanding our economy and local economy and doing that safely. So that's sort of my overall approach, which is, you know, if you're totally focused on safety, you'd shut everything down, keep everything shut down till there's a vaccine. But we know that you just can't do that, and because the downside of doing that is greater than the, you know, the pluses of which we get from that. So, and that's, I think, reflected very much in the provincial policy as well. And so obviously we're directed by provincial policy, but that's kind of the overarching theme. A couple of things that I think that are you know, what's that expression, never waste a good crisis. And a couple of the beneficial things that I've seen about COVID-19, its impact in the city, is we have a group called the Emergency Operations Committee, which has brought together, you know, or leaders of organizations across the city. That's jointed. It's with the county, the Six Nations, hospital, et cetera. And then there's a committee underneath that, which is the city's own emergency operations committee that I'm a member of as liaison for council. And what I've seen happening, because I'm kind of an outsider in the sense that I'm there as a liaison, not as a staff person. So what I'm seeing is the silo problem kind of disappearing, at least for this issue, that, you know, departments working together in some ways in a much different way than they've done in the past, because they have to. And it's brought about a much greater degree of cooperation amongst departments within the city. And so I see that as kind of the silver line. The key is, you know, keeping that moving forward. The other thing is our local economy, and, you know, the impact that this is going to have. Yeah, I think we're already starting to see it, which if you talk to real estate agents, they'll say to you a lot of interest from outside the community, residents in the GTA that want to live in a smaller community, such as ours or Guelph or wherever. But, you know, we're seeing, I think that they'll tell you much more active interest in residential properties from outside the city. And I think we're going to see that as well in terms of manufacturing, because, you know, if the movement is from offshore to onshore, then communities like ours that have a history and an infrastructure and a skill set in some of the workforce of manufacturing, that can only work to our benefit. And the other major factor I think that works to our benefit is, I think we all can understand that the future of the office commercial market is not bright. You know, companies downsizing realize they can do much more with some of their workforce working from home. And there's just got to be less demand for office commercial space. And think about Toronto or Mississauga, how much of their tax base, property tax base, is commercial office, a large, large component. And when that drops in value, then the other property tax classes have to pick up the slack, like residential and manufacturing, industrial. So here in our community, it's been to our disadvantage that we don't have, in the past, a large office commercial component, being a GTA type community. But I think it's going to work to our benefit in the sense that our tax base is not as vulnerable as that in other communities in the GTA. And also I think it's done, to some degree, it's I think helped the reputation of our city that we've done so well in respect to COVID-19. And, you know, clearly the lowest infection rate in the Greater Toronto area for sure. The only communities that have a rate that's better than ours would be Peterborough, Kingston, Sudbury, Thunder Bay. But for Southern Ontario, certainly central Southern Ontario and Southwestern Ontario, we've done really well for a city our size. And I think that's helped our reputation, I think helped our community seem more attractive. One, because we have a lower rate of infection, and two, kind of wondering, how did they do it? They must be a community that has its act together, you know? So that's helped, I think, in that sense. So enough about COVID-19. And coming out of that, the Economic Recovery Task Force. And so, that was, and some of you sat on that and gave input. And coming out of that was, I've seen other recovery task forces, other municipalities, which are very general in nature. This one was very specific, lots of action plans, and Kevin Finney and his staff, just a superlative job. Much of the heavy lifting was done there. And so I think that's going to assist us. The Recovery Task Force is meeting again shortly to, review what's happened the last 2 months and what we have to do to update that plan. In terms of city finances, yeah, major impact. The funding announcement yesterday by the province is going to go a long ways towards addressing that deficit. We're getting about 6.3 million from the province, including transit, in the first stage. The deficit projection in May was 5.5 million, but that assumed from city staff that everything would be back to normal by the end of August. It's not back to normal. So we're getting a revised projection in September. I suspect it'll be larger than 5.5 million, but the province has a second stage funding process where if we have more costs into the fall, we can apply with proof to get more funding. And that has been, we were putting, all municipalities across Ontario and the country were putting a lot of heat on the federal and provincial governments to step up and help us because, we have a very limited tax base, and they have done it. I mean, it's been, I can't be critical of what they've done, and it's going to help us as property taxpayers that I don't see having to use property tax as a method to deal with any deficit we have. I think it's probably going to be dealing with, efficiencies, deferring certain capital projects, maybe an increase in user fees, but, increasing the property taxes to deal with COVID-19 deficit is the last option. I don't think we're going to have to go there, but, who knows what's going to happen in the fall. In terms of some of what was talked about here, and that is, Kevin Finney in the role of our economic development director. Well, under the CAO, our new CAO, Brian Hutchings, he has brought a culture change here. When I first came here, oftentimes you would hear, not unusual for a city, you can't do that, or it's not possible to do that, or this is the reason why you can't do that. That wasn't true, but let's just say there was an element of that. And so he's trying to inculcate a culture of, well, no, the question should be, if this is what council and community wants, how do we do it? Knowing we're not a huge city and we have limited resources, but what can we do to achieve that? And that's happening. And that's a cultural change, and it comes from the top, and he has that approach. And we're going through some reorganization, with the focus being obviously always looking at efficiencies, but also how do we better provide more efficiently and more effectively municipal services for the community? An example of some of what's happened is that would be of interest to this committee. Kevin Finney, he now reports directly to the CAO. And so the CAO and I meet with Kevin Finney every second Monday for about half an hour. He brings us up to date. And so what that does is it's given Kevin Finney, let's just call it more street cred in the organization, and gives him more direct access to myself and the CEO. And I've seen that in a couple of projects, let's call them major projects that are in the works, where Kevin Finney is, with that kind of change in his reporting, I think it's helped him in moving things along. So that's an example of how just a change in the organization reporting can have a fairly significant impact on how the input that the economic development perspective has on city decision making. I'm not sure how much further you want me to go, but I think that's probably most that's directly relevant to this particular committee. In terms of the boundary lands, we're obviously official plan is you can't really do much to the boundary lands. Should be official plan, and there's a major push as Alan referred to get that done, and certainly have that before council before the end of the year, if not the end of the year, as soon as possible. But that's only one piece. The other piece of the puzzle is how do you do the infrastructure for those boundary lands? And so that's happening in parallel. You don't hear much about it, but that's a lot of working with finance and engineering and planning. In particular, how do you pay for that? And what are some of the different ways that municipalities have done that? We're very fortunate that our new General Manager of Public Works, Indy, we call him, Inderjit Hans, he's actually from Brampton. And so he's come from an atmosphere, an environment where you can just imagine the amount of development it had there. So he understands that process and how some of the different ways you can have to pay for and finance the necessary infrastructure. And it's going to be challenging, the infrastructure up there, because there's valleys. That means pumping stations for sewage. Housing is a big issue here. We've got a housing task force that we're hoping is going to be reporting to us in the fall. We already have a master housing plan to try and address some of the housing deficit in this community, which, the housing issue weaves through all of our social problems. It's really hard to get people to deal with their social or mental health issues if they don't have a place to live other than, the shelter or something like that. So, and the sale of Arrow does a large component of that, and you'll be hearing shortly, how that money will be utilized to expand our array of housing, affordable housing options. It's not just one method. Costco, obviously of real interest in terms of economic development, remains very much alive, and it's a large component of some of the work that I've done. And let's just say I remain optimistic that we're going to hear some very good news in the fall about that. I guess that's about it in terms of, the relationship with Six Nations, obviously very important to us. I've had a focus on improving that relationship. We're trying to find projects with the Six Nations elected council and that bureaucracy, things we can do together that would benefit both communities. And, with the glebe lands and lands around Mohawk Lake, around Woodland Cultural Center, they're owned by Six Nations and actually form part of the reserve. There's great opportunity there. And with our developing Mohawk Lake renewal and the Mohawk Greenwich lands, there's great opportunity to do projects that work to the benefit of both communities. And that's the key, the benefit of both communities. Unfortunately, the politics on Six Nations is what it is. And we're seeing, lately in Caledonia, what happens when that flares up, those tensions that are there, divisions in Six Nations. And I know the new chief there, Chief Hill, I maintain usually weekly contact with him, and he's trying to bridge those divisions, and I wish him the best on that project. Not much we can do about other than stand by and wish them all the best as they work towards hopefully a more unified community in the future. But that's for them to decide and how they deal with that. But in the meantime, there's always the risk that we have in this community, and such as we saw in 2008. And I can assure you that, there are plans. It's a risk that's always here for our community, and it's fortunately so far it hasn't impacted us, but it could at any time. And there are contingency plans how we're going to deal with that, which is a multifaceted approach. It's not just one approach. So it's, I've really tried to develop. I see my role very seriously. It's described in the Municipal Act as CEO in part, and some mayors they don't take on that role. They prefer the more ceremonial role and dealing with their councils. The CEO role really does require you as a mayor to become. You don't become the manager, but you become. I understand what a CEO is, and to me, it's analyzing really the threats that we have for our community and the opportunities, and then trying to make sure that council and the city as a whole, in our themes and our directions, that we're anticipating the threats, dealing with them, and capitalizing on the opportunities. And so I actually find that part of my job to be most invigorating. Some parts less invigorating, but that I do find very invigorating. So that's kind of it. There's more I could tell you about, but I thought those are some of the issues that would probably, in your mind, Mayor, have you thought about this? Is your city dealing with this? So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Does anyone have any questions or comments for the mayor? Carrie.
Hello, thank you, through you. Mr. Mayor, I was just wondering, the money that we're receiving for the transit, will that be used to cover the losses we've had because of the COVID, or will that be going for the new bus terminal or for additional services? Just wondering where that money is going to be allocated, if you know yet.
Yeah, the way that's coming down to us in the province, it has to be used for transit related costs. And as of the last report we got, I think it was around, the deficit was around 900,000, about that. And the amount they've allocated to us is 1.3 million. And so what the costs have been that have been over the last 2 months, I'm not sure. And that's going to be a report to us in September. Let's just say this, I think, so we were around 900,000 the end of May, June. Probably another 2 to 3 months of deficit since then. Now we're charging fares as of August 24th. So I think I can say this. I'm optimistic it's going to cover the transit-related costs. If it doesn't, you can actually apply for what's called the stage 2. Like in the fall, if we have more costs that we can relate to transit, we can apply to get more money, but we have to prove the need. Whereas this funding in the first stage, it's really coming out to municipalities based on your population. You don't have to prove you've got these costs. So at the second stage, you're going to have to prove that you've got costs. So I'm optimistic, yes. Sorry, long answer, that the province has really stepped up to the plate there. And the federal government, they're doing it jointly.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions for Mayor Davis? Councillor Atley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know our mayor is a very humble person, and I just want to say that Mayor Davis was recently acclaimed to LUMPCO, which is the large urban municipal cities of Ontario, through AMO, and please join me in congratulating our mayor for being on that important and very influential committee. Hold on, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
You can buy me a beer later.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, thanks very much, Mayor Davis. Some pretty good news in that report. We'll move on to 5.3. Kevin Finney's away today, but will we have Kevin DeCook or Bob? Kevin, are you going to look after things today for the update for economic development?
Yes, just a brief update. Kevin has asked us to bring to and it relates to the Economic Recovery Action Plan. So through the summer, have been working very closely with each other stakeholders within the city and community partners. There have, as you may know, that there was 8 categories on the Economic Recovery Action Plan, 27 initiatives, and out of those, 50 specific action items. So staff have met collectively here at Economic Development and Tourism virtually twice, and we have another meeting next week. There will be a report going forward on council, I think on September 22nd, and before that, there will be one more meeting of the task force, likely the last week of August. What we can say is that just as the task force itself, when it was working, nobody really turned down the opportunity to participate. That shows the unique strength of our community, this collaboration, working together, a willingness to get this done. And we're seeing that continue on when we work on these individual items. Some of the items are much smaller and they're easier to take on. Some of them are larger projects that will have a life probably beyond even COVID. But what we're seeing is this ongoing collaboration and willingness for the community to participate and support and really step up. So we're very happy with the progress we're making, and we look forward to giving more official word at the task force meeting in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Kevin. Any comments or questions for Kevin? No? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to 5.4. I'd like to ask Paul Basanti for an update on the Chamber of Commerce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are currently on summer hiatus for meetings, but the theme of this meeting and everything that we discuss about at the Chamber is always through the context of what is the COVID-19 recovery plan? What is the response? We strive to be a voice for our member businesses as well as the business community in Brantford and the county and Six Nations as a whole. But business owners are facing extremely difficult challenges right now. As Mayor Davis eloquently said, the way that employers look at their investment in real estate is changing. The amount of space they have that they are paying for out of their revenue in order to support office spaces that are sitting disused most of the time is causing a lot of pain and pressure to the bottom line of our local businesses. So a lot of the conversations that we are going through circle around how do businesses, many of them small to medium-sized employers, how do they wrestle with uncertainty on the revenue side, increased pressure on their expenses to create work environments that now have a whole new layer of cleaning and distancing and even some capital improvements to make their facilities work in a pandemic scene. So a lot of our conversations with our membership is passed through that lens. So I guess we are eager to be part of those conversations, to collect insight from people on the business side as well as from the municipal side, and be a point of contact that helps bring those voices together to collect consensus of best practices. And we congratulations to Mayor Davis, the local health unit, and everyone who has worked so diligently at keeping the COVID numbers locally so low. But the way that business is conducted now has been changed possibly for a long period of time. So to that end, we are integrating really well with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce as well as the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And both those provincial and federal chambers have a lot of programs designed to get as much information on assistance and other practices for businesses to employ in order to try and weather this storm as best as possible, and even come out as in a position of growth. There are some unique sectors happening now that are poised to make big differences, and that's sort of the flavor of what's going on. On the lighter side of things, our Business Excellence Award is scheduled for August 27th. If you haven't received an invitation, feel free to reach out to me. We certainly we won't be getting together like we usually do, but the business community and the leaders in that community who are making an impact certainly need to be celebrated just as much. And so we're putting together a program in a virtual sense that we hope will celebrate their achievements and their hard work during these really uncertain times. The other thing that's sort of top of mind for the chamber is the business community is very interested to see how safe consumption sites get rolled out. Prior to COVID happening, at our February meeting, we were about to set up a number of sessions to wrestle with this issue in particular. By no means is there resistance to having these safe consumption sites, but our collected knowledge from various other case studies is that there are right and wrong ways to do them, both from the perspective of the social welfare point of view, as well as the impact on business. So we continue to be interested in participating in any conversations that relate to I don't know if there's task force set up, but anything that does get rolled out on that side of things, there's certainly a lot of consideration that we'd like to bring to light on some of the best practices that have happened throughout Canada. So a little bit light, I'll be brief today, but happy to answer any specific questions that anyone has.
Mayor Davis?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Paul, you've raised a couple of interesting issues, and I don't really have a question for you, but just to kind of supplement and ancillary to your report to us. It's been very interesting, the impact COVID-19 on this city and watching that. And, you know, the conventional wisdom before, I think, was, oh, you can't have your staff working from home, right? It's the productivity will plummet. And what's been interesting here is that probably 2/3 of the workforce here at the city is those that haven't been laid off. And there were very substantial layoffs, but especially in Parks and Recreation. But anyways, for those departments where it can be done, we're seeing improved record in terms of productivity and absenteeism. And we're trying to figure out, you know, why that is and how we continue with that. And as in our new city hall, it's caused us to really rethink, you know, who should be in here and how often should they be in here? And should we have like workstations properly sanitized, et cetera, where you have people, you know, working from home very productively with the key is the right supervision, how you manage that. And only coming into the office, maybe it's, you know, once a week or something. So, and I know that's happening all across the economy, right? The same kind of exercise. It's like we're in this big lab and we're experimenting with different ways of doing work that's more efficient. The implication for the city is that, you know, the proposal was that the Health and Human Services Department would come over here into this building. And, you know, maybe that's not going to be necessary. Maybe some of that can be accommodated in Old City Hall. So it's like I said, that's the silver lining of this crisis, that it's causing many organizations and people to rethink how they do their business. And if you don't take advantage of that opportunity, then, you know, I think you're missing a tremendous opportunity. The other issue with safe consumption sites. So that is like a city does not, the Corporation City of Brantford doesn't roll that out. We would not operate it. It comes under healthcare, which is the sole responsibility of the province. Of course, we would have a supportive role, but the province has been, you know, the Ford government, originally we were thinking they were going to just not permit safe consumption sites. They did, but they changed the procedure and process. And you really have to show and demonstrate community acceptance. And so it'll be an organization that wants to run one, and they do it, and they apply to the province. And the province requires proof that the community will accept it. And so that process requires extensive public consultation, coming to council, getting a council resolution, you know, surveys, confirming the local community or neighborhood will accept it. So in no way can this safe consumption site be located in our community without that process. So, and there is an organization in town that's begun that process. So right now it's public consultation, really. And, you know, it's going to be, you know, the opioid problem hasn't gone away. It hasn't been as bad this year as it's been in years past in terms of the data regarding death and overdoses, but it's still there. I think it's symptomatic of something, a much greater problem that we have in our society, but regardless, it's there. It still creates impact across the community, and in particular in respect to petty crime, needles, that sort of thing. And it requires a number of different solutions, some of which a city can do, most of which the province does in funds. But clearly that's another piece of a safe consumption site. But anyways, so be rest assured that there would be extensive public consultation before there could be a site approved and funded by the province.
Paul?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify a point. If I made it seem as if the city was going to operate the site, I certainly apologize for that confusion. The city has the wherewithal to sort of work within its zoning bylaws and other bylaws to influence the outcome of some of these decisions, and that was more to the point of what I was sort of hinting at through through what I was saying.
Yeah, if I might just, so Chair, I think the way the process works is, so if a group wants a safe consumption site, they'd have to come to council with a resolution, and that would have to identify the site, right? Because I think as I read the provincial process, you have to show you've consulted with like the neighborhood in your proposed site. So it's a pretty rigorous, thorough process the province has laid down. So I don't think we need to address it through zoning. In fact, there's probably case law that says we can, like in methadone clinics, municipalities in the past have tried to deal with that issue through zoning, and it's been ruled by the courts you can't do that. You're not permitted to do that. So you can't do site-specific zoning for methadone clinics. But you can't put one without the site without a council approving it, and in essence, the community approving it.
Any other questions or comments for Paul? No? All right, thanks very much, Paul, for your report. I'd like to go to 5.5, and we have Carrie Korfman here. Nice to have someone from the Brantford Downtown BIA. Go ahead, Corey, or Carrie, what do you have?
Just a little bit here. I just want to say, of course, our members are struggling through this COVID. We've lost a few businesses. Surprisingly, a few have opened as well, which is a good sign. We do have a lot of small businesses struggling, though, as you know. Downtowns are struggling generally, but they're also, after an event like this, they're also the first things to revitalize and come back again. So we're hoping that this is in our future. We're trying to support our members through signage, the proper signage for their businesses, through PPE sourcing, promotion. We're doing the Shop Local Stronger Together campaign, supporting them through the digital Main Street program through the OBIA, and helping our members become more tech savvy and social media savvy, which of course is the way of the future. We're glad that the government kept the wage subsidy, of course. That'll help a lot of our members stay alive up until December at least, and then hoping more things come beyond that. We're also glad there's a development review process. Of course, we've had lots of members and potential businesses run into roadblocks and barriers that we hope can be taken down. That's all for now.
Anyone have a comment or question for Carrie? Okay, well, thanks very much. Nice to have you, Carrie. Welcome, and look forward to seeing you in the future. Number 6, resolutions. Are there any resolutions from today's meeting? Councillor Audley?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a resolution, but I do have a quick couple of updates, if I may. I should have and could have done this under 5.2, but very quickly, this fall, there's an adult skills job fair. That'll be a virtual job fair. And I don't have the date for it. And I'm asking if Bob Ham, if you could attach some information to the minutes of today's meeting, please, that outlines what's going on with the job fair, if you're able to do that. Thank you, Bob. They're looking for companies to participate, and I think what that would mean is having some sort of online feature where the people that attend or sign up for this job fair event can contact with a business person at that company. But we'll get you more information on that. And then lastly, Mr. Chair, Brantford Power is relocated to two of its three operations to Savannah Oaks Drive in the former Westcast Industries building. The shop part of the operation is under construction right now, and that will occupy both Brantford Power and Energy Plus from Cambridge. So it's going to be a pretty neat looking facility when it's all done, and consolidate three operations under one roof, four including Energy Plus. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. All right, no resolutions. So any notices of motion from anyone? No? Just before I adjourn, I have a couple of comments. There's a downtown Brantford notice of study commencement for the downtown streetscaping class environmental assessment. So it's a study by the city of Brantford for a class environmental assessment for streetscaping to improve walkability, accessibility, underground infrastructure to allow for development, enhance the infrastructure for all transportation modes, and increase the pedestrian capacity. So you can get more information on this and find out how you can contribute or make some comments. Go to www.brantford.ca/new downtown. Or you can go to Corey and she can send that over to you if she hasn't done that already. And just before we adjourn, please note that this meeting has been arranged under special circumstances since KPMG was seeking EDAC's input for their final report. And regular virtual or in-person EDAC meetings will not resume in September. Corey Francis will advise EDAC members when a regular scheduled meeting will commence. And, Mayor Davis.
Sorry, Ken. You mentioned that street downtown assessment. Can I just say a few little words about that as well, if you don't mind?
No, please.
I'm glad you brought it up, and there's a lot of criticism. Well, you're wasting money, and why are you doing this? So, but I tell you this, so it's really driven by the infrastructure underground is old and cannot support this. I'm talking about Colburn and Deleuze Street now downtown, between Brant Ave and Clarence Street. It really cannot properly service the type of expanded development I'd like to see downtown. So it's really driven by the need to fix and change and upgrade the pipes, let's call it that. And if you're going to rip everything up, well, then you might as well take a hard look at, okay, what's the sidewalks going to look like? Two-way streets, one-way streets, pedestrians. So, and because it's a large project, you can't do it without an environmental assessment. That's clear. So this is part of the environmental assessment process for that very important project. And this is the streetscape part, the stuff above ground, which is almost as important as what's underneath the ground in terms of what's our downtown going to look like over the next 50 years, because this infrastructure hopefully will last for at least 50 years. And whatever you're putting on top, once you put the pipes down below, you want it to last for 3, 4, 5 decades. So it's important, and it's not a frivolous exercise. It's required to do the project. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to supplement your announcement.
No, thanks very much for that. And I mean, that's a fantastic thing that we're going to go ahead with both the infrastructure and to ensure that we beautify the downtown and look for long-term. I mean, we've been working on I've been around for a long time here, and we've been working on the downtown for ages. I was on the downtown task force for years. I'm so glad to see that we're really, trying to make a difference. So thanks for that. All right, can I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn this meeting, please? Paul and Mark. Thanks very much, everybody, for doing this, taking some time from your summer activities, and it's nice to see everybody. And thanks, and enjoy what's left of the summer.